Welcome to Mana's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 12. The Paladin of the Holy Kingdom. There was only one elder brother among her relatives whom she could trust, Caspin. Since she lived like this all this time, Remedios was a spiritual oasis for Kalka. Yumu. Such unbelievable power makes me think of the might of the demon gods from the stories. Nisama, even the demon gods weren't this powerful. For all we know, Jeldabaoth might be a being superior to the demon gods. What a pain. Then how shall we beat him? What are you worrying about, Kalka-sama? They say he was defeated by the adamantite-ranked adventurers of the kingdom. Don't you think we could do the same too? That is true. If adventurers comparable to us could do it, but the problem now lies in whether or not Jeldabaoth can repeatedly use that power which brought down the wall. On that note, the adjutants feel that given the wall was only struck once, he ought to have problems using it in succession. That's understandable. If he could use it repeatedly, then he could have just done so. He didn't because he could only attack once. Kalka agreed with Remedio's opinion. If there was a way to do it, there was no reason not to repeatedly use that attack. It was the same with Kalka. She lightly stroked the crown she wore. It was a magic item that was the binding focus for the grand ritual spell that had been passed down through the Holy Kingdom, the last holy war. Well, we can conscript high-ranking adventurers, the kind who are used to defeating monsters and the like, as part of mobilizing our people. If we muster up our full fighting power, Jeldabaoth's hardly an unbeatable foe. The fact is, he's already been defeated once before. The Adventurers Guild had strongly protested the conscription of adventurers into the army, but Kalka had not revoked her order. It was only to be expected. This was a matter of national importance, and splitting their strength was foolish in the extreme. In addition, the Adventurers Guild was hardly as powerful as the Holy Kingdom itself, so forcing them to obey was a simple task. That's true. Though I guess we failed in that we didn't gain detailed intelligence about Jeldabaoth's activities in the kingdom. I apologize for that. No, I didn't mean that, Queralt. You're not at fault. The blame lies with me, since I didn't pay attention to news about other countries. Certainly not, Kalka-sama. It's definitely Queralt's fault. Nisama. Well, it's certainly not my fault. I did my job by protecting Kalka-sama and clearing away monsters. I didn't mess up in my job. That's what they call making appropriate use of talent. Remedios puffed up her chest and fed in triumph. She was correct to say so. That said, it still bothered her. Could it be that Jeldabaoth was behind those incidents where all the people from several villages went missing? That might be the case. Some time ago, the residents of quite a few villages had all gone missing. In the end, they had not managed to collect any information pointing to a culprit, but it was possible that Jeldabaoth was pulling the strings behind the scenes. In that case, we need to sort this out before we defeat Jeldabaoth. Speaking of which, if only the kingdom had properly finished him off, we wouldn't have had trouble like this. Did Gazastronov fight him? Queralt looked at Kalka with a puzzled look on her face. Her eyes seemed to be asking, didn't you tell Nisama about it? Therefore, Kalka gave her an answer, which laid those doubts to rest, and then she smiled tiredly. Translated, it meant, of course I told her. I told her about how Jeldabaoth attacked the royal capital, how the adventurers defeated Jeldabaoth, the other demons that appeared, and how the warrior captain defeated them all. I told her everything, so it must have been squeezed out by other things and gone in one ear ran out the other. I really feel sorry for Nisama's vice captains. Why are you talking about them all of a sudden? Queralt did not answer that question, instead curling a lock of hair around her finger. Since Remedios did not do any thinking, then there had to be someone to cover her ass. That would be them. She could keenly appreciate the suffering they went through. However, Remedios' innocence, or stupidity, if one were not inclined to be polite, also had a healing effect on the soul, so the positives and negatives cancelled each other out. Ha. I only know the rough details, but apparently, he fought with another demon, which was covered in scales. Really now? Well, if he had defeated Jeldabaoth, things wouldn't have ended up like this. Or don't tell me, those adamantite-ranked adventurers are stronger than him. I'm not too sure about that, but I think that might be the case. Remedios frowned in distaste. She was probably unhappy because someone whose strength she had acknowledged was being slighted by someone else. Well, all he knows is how to use a sword. If he had anti-demon attacks like we do, things would probably have been different. In pure fighting power, paladins were a notch below warriors. However, that was not the case when fighting evil beings. Remedios was right, but Queralt still sighed quietly. Just then, Kalka imagined that she had heard the sound of bells. Remedios immediately sprang into action. At times like this, she was still the first to act. She flung open the windows. The early autumn air flowed in, and the air warmed by their three bodies flowed out. The bracing, cool air brought with it the sound of ringing bells. That was proof that what she had heard earlier was not a ghost sound caused by her ears ringing. No, it would have been much better if she had just misheard things. At the same time, she heard the sound of several footsteps from the hallway. Kalka-sama, please stand behind me. Remedios quickly drew the holy sword Saphorisia and moved up, putting herself between Kalka and the door. The door opened with a pawn. Your Majesty. She recognized the first man to enter the room as he shouted at the top of his voice. He was the chief of staff. What happened? Why are you in such a rush? Remedios' voice carried a hint of rebuke, and the chief of staff replied in a clearly disconcerted tone. There was no time to slowly walk over. Your Majesty. It's Jeldabaoth. Jeldabaoth's appeared inside the city. He's begun destroying the city with many demons in tow. Also, the demihumans have made their move. It looks like they're advancing on this place. What did you say? We've sighted the demihuman army in the vicinity. We don't know how they deceived our sentries, but we were fed false information. The fighting's going to start any moment now. Well, the sudden excess of information confused her. That lasted for only a second. Kalka immediately resumed her queenly demeanor and gave orders. Well, this is a great departure from our plans. We will begin combat with Jeldabaoth now. While we stall him, prepare to engage the demihuman army. Convey my orders to the adventurers. As she heard her subordinate's words, the doubts in Kalka's heart flooded back again. Had she underestimated Jeldabaoth? Of course, she had no intention of underestimating the demon who could easily destroy the wall. But was feeling that she could beat him a mistake in itself? Would it not have been better to fall back until they had finished learning about their enemy? No. Kalka waved away the budding weakness in her heart. If they did not fight now, then when would they fight? Well, it was important to know the enemy. Now was the only chance they had to strike with all their might. After this, the attrition of battle would deplete their resources, and it would become more and more difficult to muster the power they could command now. In addition, continuously retreating until they had completed their intelligence-gathering operations was essentially permitting their country to be trampled underfoot. If that were the case, an unimaginable number of her citizens would end up suffering. I will let the small folk live their days in happiness, and make this a country where nobody will be hurt. Indeed, Kalka-sama. All smiles, Remedios followed up on Kalka's self-directed mutterings. However, those were words she had spoken in the past, before she knew the truth of the world. Things being what they were now, it seemed a nigh impossible aim to achieve. He's gotten cocky now that he's crossed the wall, but to think he didn't bring his demihuman army with him. Remedios fumed angrily. Was it really like that? No, it ought to have been that way. Yet, she could not peel away the undeniable sense that something was wrong which coiled around her heart. Don't lower your guard, okay? Is this the way you ought to be treating an opponent of such power? Of course, Kalka-sama. I don't intend to be careless at all. With this holy sword, I shall relieve the demon of his head and present it to you. No good. I can't calm her down anymore. That was what Kalka thought, but she was not worried about her. That was because Remedios was a different person when she stepped onto the battlefield. There's no need to bother with the head, but your loyalty makes me very happy. In that case, regarding the plan to defeat Jeldabaoth, can you buy us some time? But of course, your servant has already dispatched an advance force to carry out our plans. At that moment, Kalka felt a dull ache in her heart. That was because carrying out that order was actually sending them out to die. The soldiers would be going out to fight Jeldabaoth, despite having no chance of victory. One of her duties as a monarch was to trade the lives of the few for the survival of the many. Therefore, she could not weep or wail here. The soldiers were giving their lives for her, so she would need to put on a show to convince them that this was a glorious assignment. She would have to play the part of the Supreme Queen, the Holy Queen who was respected above all others. In that case, let's head out. The ringing clap of her hands was the signal for everyone to make their move. Remedios gripped her holy sword and slashed the demon. Her vice-captains had told her its name, but she had completely forgotten it, in half. Imbued with holy power, the blade could inflict grievous wounds upon evil beings, and it was doing so to great effect. She had cut down the demons rampaging through the city, one after the other. The fallen demons vanished as thick white smoke steamed from their wounds. Within seconds, there was no trace that the demons had ever been there. However, the signs of how the demons had ravaged the city remained. How could this be? She looked at a fallen soldier, not one of the vanguard troopers, but a local patrolman, and Remedios bellowed in rage. His leather armor had been cleanly severed, and the hands clutching his abdomen were stained a deep red. She could even see the pink of his innards. His face was well past the point of paleness, now bloodless white. While she had almost no medical knowledge, her own experiences supplied enough information for her to make a judgment. There was no time to send the wounded soldiers back to a casualty collection point. She would need to treat them on the spot with magic. The soldiers were not yet dead, but it was neither a miraculous survival, nor was it because the soldiers were simply that good, so was this the demon's aim. That said, she had no idea what the demons were planning. Still, the option to simply let the soldiers die did not exist in Remedio's heart. Nobody would ever discard the brave soldiers who had chosen to become a shield for their nation in order to buy their country time. And the most important thing was that she was a paladin of righteousness. Begin healing him. Remedios was accompanied not just by the elite paladins behind her, but also by several priests. Her order was directed at them. In response, one of her vice captains stepped up and whispered in her ear. Would it not be better to let the medics in the rear aid him? If we use the priest's mana here, we might run out when fighting Jaldabaoth, which might be the demon's aim. Ah, you talk too much. This is an order. Heal him to the point where he can move on his own. Also. At this point, Remedios glanced at the adjutant beside her and said, I can't hear you muttering through your helmet, so speak up. Ah, no, it's fine. Very good. The healing magic mended the soldier's wounds swiftly. Of course, the recovery was not complete. After all, this was only a first-tier spell, and it could not fully restore a soldier on the verge of death. Even so, it was enough to heal the soldiers to the point where they could stagger around. Since the soldiers were no longer in danger of dying, there was no need to heal them any further. Remedios still remembered her sister's incessant nagging to wisely use limited resources. You brave gentlemen, stay that way and listen. We've performed first aid on your wounds, so fall back. After that, let the medics at the rear tend to you. The pain of walking was probably enough to drive the soldiers to tears. However, she no longer had the time to hear them out. She had to reach her destination before Jaldabaoth arrived. The soldiers also sensed the meaning in Remedios' powerful gaze. None of them spoke up or protested, they simply agreed with each other. All right. Then let's meet again later. Remedios broke into a sprint at the head of her troops. Her metal armor was lighter and easier to move in than it appeared, and given her physical abilities, she could reach her destination faster than anyone else. However, her sister, Kalka, and her adjutants often told her, don't charge in by yourself all the time. So, Remedios throttled back the desire to sprint with all her might, and quashed the desire to make up for lost time. Soon, Remedios reached her destination, which was a corner of the city.